Willie Francis. In 1946, a young African-American named Willie Francis survived an attempt at execution in the electric chair. 2 years earlier, in 1944, a pharmacist from St. Martinville, Louisiana, named Andrew Thomas, was found dead after receiving multiple gunshots. It was said that Thomas had been abusing young people in the area, leading many to believe that Willie Francis might have been one of his victims. For 9 months, the case remained unsolved until in August 1945, Willie, only 16 years old, was arrested as the primary suspect. According to the police, he was found with Thomas's wallet, but no evidence ever proved this. Moreover, the weapon used in the crime belonged to the county sheriff's assistant, August Fusilier, which raised even more doubts about Willie's guilt. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, he was pressured into signing 2 written confessions likely obtained under coercion. His trial was a sham. The defense attorneys didn't call any witnesses or raise objections, and within just 2 days, an all-white jury found him guilty and sentenced him to death on May 3, 1946. Willie was taken to the electric chair. However, the execution failed. The portable electric chair had been installed by a prison guard who was drunk, preventing the current from killing him. Against all odds, Willie Francis survived. After this incident, a lawyer named Bertrand DeBlanc took on his case and appealed to the Supreme Court, arguing the execution had been inhumane and the trial deeply flawed. The murder weapon and Thomas's body had both disappeared before proceedings began. The court rejected the appeal. On May 9, 1947, Willie was sent back to the chair. This time, there were no mistakes. His last words, directed at a reporter, "I'm going to meet the Lord with my Sunday pants and my Sunday heart." Wes Lowell Moguel. On November 1, 1896, Wes Lowell was a Mexican soldier under the command of General Francisco Villa. However, after the start of the Mexican Revolution, Weslow was captured and sentenced to death by firing squad. Being executed by firing squad is one of the most brutal forms of execution a condemned person can face. But somehow, Weslow survived. During that execution, he was shot between 8 and 9 times in his body, and as a final measure, they shot him point blank in the head to ensure his death. But after everything was over, Weslow realized that he was still alive, although he decided to play dead to avoid being killed again. When his body was taken down, Weslow managed to crawl through the night to the church of Santiago Apostol, which was 3 blocks away. A member of the church found him and took him to his home, where he recovered. Though permanently scarred and disfigured, Weslow survived that execution. This case highlights how shocking human error can be and the tragedy behind the death penalty. Kenneth Smith. In a controversial first convicted killer, Kenneth Smith requested to die by having pure nitrogen pumped into his lungs, a method never before attempted anywhere in the world. Kenneth Smith, a hitman from the U.S., was hired by preacher Charles Sennett Sr. to kill his wife Elizabeth. Charles, drowning in debt, planned her death to collect life insurance, paying Smith and another man $11,000 each. The plan fell apart, and Smith was captured and sentenced to death. After 33 years on death row, his execution date finally arrived, but the 3-person team failed to find a vein for the lethal injection. They repeatedly punctured his arms while he screamed and begged them to stop, eventually puncturing his muscle and clavicle trying to access the subclavian artery. After 4 hours, they returned him to his cell, complying with a court order to halt. In Smith's own words, "Their masks were covered in my blood." On August 26, 2023, Alabama decided Smith would be executed by nitrogen hypoxia. He would simply inhale the gas until he lost consciousness and died. On January 25, 2024, it was carried out. Through the mask muffling his final words, Smith said, "Tonight, Alabama made humanity take a step back. I leave with love, peace, and light." Witnesses saw him strapped to the gurney, covered with a white sheet. He violently shook for about 25 minutes. This time, there was no escape. Half-hanged Maggie. Maggie was born around 1702, somewhere near Edinburgh. She made her living the hard way, hauling fish through the streets to sell. In 1723, her husband left her, and she did what a lot of people do after a life falls apart. She moved, headed south to Kelso, trying to put distance between herself and whatever she was leaving behind. In the 1720s, she got pregnant, unmarried, which meant she was already in trouble before the baby ever arrived. At that time, there was a law in Scotland. If an unmarried woman concealed a pregnancy and the child died, the assumption wasn't an accident or tragedy. It was murder. And unfortunately, Maggie's baby was born dead, or died almost immediately. She hid the body near a river, but it was found later, and she was arrested. On September 1724, at the age of 22, Maggie was hanged publicly at the Grass Market in Edinburgh. A big crowd watched. After the hanging, officials said she was dead. They put her body in a wooden coffin to take it back to her hometown for burial. But on the way, people heard strange noises, knocking and banging from inside the coffin. When they opened it, Maggie was alive. She was breathing, talking, and right away she complained of a very sore neck and throat. She survived likely because the drop wasn't enough to snap her neck cleanly, or the rope failed to cut off blood flow long enough. The body is stubborn in ways that occasionally defy what we intend for it. Under Scottish law at the time, once the punishment was done, even if it failed, she could not be hanged again for the same crime. So, Maggie was set free. Right after her revival, she had clear injuries from the hanging. Despite the lasting neck issues and soreness, Maggie recovered enough to live a full life. She became famous. People called her Half-Hanged Maggie. She lived many more years until around 1765, remarried, had children, and lived a normal life in Musselburgh. Rommel Broom. On September 15, 2009, convicted rapist and murderer Rommel Broom was scheduled to be executed by lethal injection in the state of Ohio. Broom was born on June 4, 1956, in Michigan, and moved to Ohio with his mother at the age of 5. Over time, he became involved with bad influences that shaped the course of his life. His criminal history began in 1974 with car thefts on highways, but soon escalated to more serious crimes, including rape and murder. The crime that led him to death row was the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Trina Middleton, a 14-year-old girl who was walking home with her friends after a football game in East Cleveland, Ohio. After being identified through DNA evidence, he was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to death by lethal injection. However, his execution turned into an unexpected struggle. For over 2 hours, the executioners unsuccessfully attempted to find a suitable vein to administer the lethal drugs. During the process, Broom suffered extreme pain from the repeated punctures in his arms. Eventually, the state of Ohio intervened and halted the execution. Initially, it was rescheduled for a week later, but over time, his lawyers succeeded in delaying it for years. Broom even wrote a book about his traumatic experience. Although a new execution date was set for 2022, it never took place. On December 20th, 2020, Rommel Broom passed away due to complications from COVID-19. While he ultimately died on death row, it is undeniable that he managed to evade his execution and live far longer than the state had originally planned. Joseph Samuel. In 1795, a German man named Joseph Samuel was sentenced to be transported as a prisoner to Australia. He escaped from the British penal settlement in Sydney and returned to England, where he and his gang robbed the house of a wealthy woman and killed the police officer guarding it. The authorities launched an intense manhunt. During the trial, the woman identified Samuel as one of the culprits. He confessed to the robbery, but denied killing the officer. Since he was the only one identified, he was sentenced to death while the others were released for lack of evidence. On September 26, 1803, Samuel was hanged alongside other prisoners. The ropes were strong enough to support 450 kilograms, more than capable. The other prisoners died. Samuel's rope broke, and he fell to the ground. The executioner prepared a second rope, also rated to 450 kilograms, and raised him again. The moment the cart was removed, the rope loosened, and Samuel fell once more. A third rope. A third attempt. It failed again. The crowd erupted, calling for his release. The situation turned violent. The chief of police halted the execution until the governor arrived. The governor examined the ropes, no signs of tampering, and noted that the same ropes had successfully hanged the other prisoners. He agreed with the crowd. This was likely a sign from God. Samuel's sentence was commuted to life imprisonment.